Teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhat, perfectly pure and complete Buddha, all-knowing, having poise, Sugata, apprehender of the world, navigator of beings to be subdued, incomparable, teacher of gods and humans, to the Buddha, the Bhagavan, the glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, we prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. To the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, I go for refuge until becoming enlightened. Through the merit of my generosity and so on, may I achieve Buddhahood to benefit all beings. To the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, I go for refuge until becoming enlightened. Through the merit of my generosity and so on, may I achieve Buddhahood to benefit all beings. To the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, I go for refuge until becoming enlightened. Through the merit of my generosity and so on, may I achieve Buddhahood to benefit all beings. So spend a moment or two cultivating the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta, the altruistic, pure, superior intention to achieve enlightenment, to realize and maximize your potential in order to be capable of serving the welfare of all living beings trapped within the cycle of existence. And think, I will study the three principal paths and cultivate my mind, purifying all obstacles, obscurations and hindrances. And perfecting all virtues, such as my love, my compassion and wisdom. And I will engage in the 6 perfections of the Bodhisattva path. And attain perfect enlightenment, Buddhahood. And think, this purpose, attaining perfect enlightenment, I will accomplish in order to achieve the great purpose and benefit for myself, simultaneously the great purpose and benefit for others. Since all of us within the cycle of samsara, the cycle of birth, aging and death, we are all dealing with suffering, pain and uncertainty, and lacking true enduring happiness. We are constantly seeking happiness, most of the time through the sense doors, seeking pleasant sights and sounds, smells, environments, food, good company, relationships, and so on. Whatever happiness we experience is fleeting. And more effort, more seeking, more actions are required. And I am no different to others, others no different to myself in this case. So not only for my own sake, but for the welfare of others, to be useful to others, to be capable of helping others achieve enduring happiness, freedom and definite bliss. This is the purpose or good reason as to why I will achieve perfect enlightenment. May all living beings have happiness. May they possess the true causes of happiness. May all living beings be free from suffering, and may they be free from the true causes of suffering. May all living beings never be separated from the bliss, the pure joy of nirvana liberation. May all living beings abide in equanimity, their minds free from attachment, hatred, and great ignorance. So today I thought I would give a brief presentation as to why enlightenment is possible. And in looking at this, look at our own innate potential. So I wanted to start by saying how I miss everybody. It's actually quite difficult for me to teach to a little tripod with a funny little camera on the top of it, and not to be looking at your beautiful faces and teaching to all of you that I've known for a long, long time. So I apologise if I don't do such a good job, but Margaret suggested I should get a photo of you all and put it in front of me, so then I can see and to recall. Visualising you all is what I'll try to do. But it's very interesting, sort of just looking at a camera. So anyway, I think it's very, very beautiful and it's very, very powerful to contemplate why enlightenment is possible. You know, there is a vast array of teachings in the path to enlightenment and the great texts, the great commentaries on the sutras of Lord Buddha. But it's always been a very important for me and a very powerful for me personally to contemplate what is the very basis for all of these teachings, you know, and why the Buddha taught. Why is this enlightenment possible? Some commentaries on the 4 kayas of a Buddha or the 4 bodies of a Buddha. It's hard to fathom these qualities for my mind, my limited mind. It's hard to conceive of the qualities of the omniscient mind of a Buddha. And to some extent, for a long time, I just relied on some sort of faith, but a faith that wasn't particularly wisdom-based. But I had a great trust in my gurus, especially my root guru, Geshe Acharya Thupten Lodin, the extraordinary authority on the Buddha's teachings. But then in my life, you know, my mind would go up and down, and we all experience ups and downs on our spiritual journey. And if we look within our minds, sometimes we can recognize that our faith is maybe not so clear, not so deep. And faith is very, very important. And here we're not particularly looking for just acceptance and a blind faith. And in a sutra, the Lamp of Jewel Sutra, the Buddha said that faith precedes all qualities. So this is important to recognize. So what faith do we need? What is the most reliable or stable faith? It's a faith based on your wisdom, on you checking up. A believing faith, not just accepting, not a wishing or hoping faith. So when I have contemplated and paid attention to the teachings that Geshe-la gave many years ago, and you'll find in the Path to Enlightenment itself, the fundamental potential for enlightenment, it explains why enlightenment is possible. And even understanding the potential for enlightenment in hearing, studying and contemplating, superficially, it's not enough. To deepen your faith, meditate more. Study, listen, but meditate. Engage in analytical meditation and combining that with single-pointed meditation on this fundamental potential. Try to understand it more and more for yourself. Understanding the inner potential of our minds, this innate natural potential we have, is unbelievably inspiring, and it can be a beautiful counterbalance to your current view of yourself, particularly low self-esteem and anxieties and fears. It's amazing how many layers we have within our minds and what's going on from below this surface layer. It's important to have confidence and conviction to be successful. And it should be the case that the study of the Buddha's Dharma is undertaken to be successful, not just to get by, not to apply like a band-aid in your life, but to achieve the realization and complete transformation of who you are, of your mind, and actualize and realize this extraordinary innate capacity and potential that we have. This potential for enlightenment, called a Buddha potential or Tathagata Garbha, we have had forever, and yet here we are, with a mind afflicted with suffering, delusions, karmas, and so on. We will always have the potential for enlightenment, and it is in fact the pure nature of our own minds. At a subtle level, the most subtle level of our mind is perfectly pure. That's worth contemplating a lot. You look in your heart, what is your view of yourself? How do you feel about that? And this purity is ever present. It's obscured to us. It's not immediately accessible because we have so many layers of emotion and delusion and karma. So this is a beautiful thing to study, and I would recommend for newer students, for older students, to spend a lot of time reading, rereading, studying and studying again this fundamental potential. In Geshe Lodin's extraordinary Path to Enlightenment text, you'll find a brief description of this on page 294. Geshe-la then, later in his life, wrote the beautiful text, The Fundamental Potential for Enlightenment, which goes into incredible detail with regards to this fundamental potential for enlightenment that we possess. If you like, it's like the valid basis for the Buddhist teachings and Buddhist pathways, that your enlightenment is definitely possible. Geshe-la makes the point in his path to enlightenment how Buddha Shakyamuni himself, over a long period of time, engaged in the three principal paths, cultivated his realization of renunciation, cultivated his pure great love, pure great compassion, and the altruistic mind of enlightenment, cultivated and perfected the 6 transcendental actions of the Bodhisattva path, and step by step realized his innate natural potential and achieved the 4 kayas of Buddhahood, achieved the complete purity of the mind. And the Buddha was an ordinary person. And I made this point briefly in my previous talk about refuge, which was just meant to be a brief presentation on refuge, looking at key points that we should maybe find useful, could find useful for ourselves. I've always found it very inspiring that the Buddha was just like us, an ordinary person, relying on his refuge in Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, and relying on his relationship with holy teachers. He cultivated his own wisdom of listening and his wisdom of deep thinking and contemplation. And the Buddha perfected his wisdom of meditation and internalized all of the teachings of the Buddhas. And he realized his own innate potential and accomplished perfect enlightenment, showing us what we can do and how we can go about this pathway. And through the infinite love, affection and compassion of the Buddha, he taught us how we can realize this innate potential. You know, people think in terms of worldly potential and really admire worldly potential. We can be rich, you could be famous, you could have lots of friends, you can have lots of possessions. You have the potential to be wealthy, to be famous, and so on, which at the end of life becomes quite meaningless. You're selling yourself short. Your potential is to abide in a state of unceasing bliss, clarity and emptiness, and bring infinite benefit into the lives of others. So contemplate that and the life of the Buddha. And then why did the Buddha achieve this? Did he possess something that we don't? Of course, other than his own merit and continuous accumulation of merit, his diligence, his effort and application and so on. Of course, the Buddha excelled in time, but he started somewhere. Why it was all possible for Shakyamuni Buddha and all previous Buddhas is because of the pure nature of the mind itself, that is unborn and unceasing and ever present. Even when your mind is down, when you're having a bad day, when you're emotionally distraught, the mind at its most subtle level is still perfectly pure. It never becomes anything other than being perfectly pure. So what is the problem? Why is it that that's not my experience? Because this pure nature of the mind, this potential for enlightenment, is obscured to us. What are those obscurations? Put simply, it is our own destructive emotions or delusions and the resultant karmas, the karmic seeds and tendencies that are layered within our minds, obscuring this beautiful purity so that it's not accessible immediately for us. And personally, one of the most inspiring and beautiful practices is to meditate on the mind itself, because you can find a more subtle level of mind if you practice consistently mindfulness of the mind, as done within the Mahamudra pathways. in Geshe Lodin's Fundamental Potential for Enlightenment, if you were to study pages 34 to 37, you can get at least a brief understanding, but a beautiful understanding of this fundamental potential. The view of the schools of Buddha's thought, especially the Chittamatra views and the Madhyamika views, is that it is the intrinsic nature of the mind itself that is the potential we have for enlightenment. Described slightly differently, and because of time and the nature of this presentation, I won't go into the details. You will find it clearly laid out in Geshe-la's Fundamental Potential for Enlightenment. But this intrinsic nature, it is agreed and viewed that this intrinsic nature of the mind, this naturally present pure nature of the mind, can be separated from the defilements. That these obscuring and obstructing factors we have, so think in terms of your emotional states, the views and ideas you have of yourself, your karma, the limitless layers of karmic seeds and tendencies, just obscure this innate potential, but they never become or mix with this pure nature of mind itself. In that sense, they don't completely become the mind, don't merge with this pure nature of the mind, this intrinsic nature. At one level, this intrinsic nature and the capacity for mind to be separated from defilements is that the mind is a formless continuum of clarity and cognition, a formless continuum of clarity and experience. And then the final nature of the mind, this clarity and awareness, clarity and cognition, is the fact that this mind is empty of any inherent existence. That is, there is no one thing that you can point to, isolate or identify, that by itself, independent of causes and conditions, independent of mind's labelling, that is the mind itself. There is no one standalone, self-existent essence. That is, the mind lacks this quality. Mind is a dependent arising, and therefore is empty of this inherent existence. If the mind were inherently existent, then it would be permanent. The qualities of the mind, if they were inherently existent, would be permanent. And this is not the case. And this state of the mind, this ultimate nature of the mind, this is an ultimate truth. The emptiness quality, this emptiness nature of the mind, is free of defilements. Therefore, we need to realize this ultimate nature of the mind itself, a state that is completely free of all defilements. So there is a pathway for us, a pathway journey to engage in, and that is to purify the mind and ultimately realize the conventional nature of the mind, clarity awareness, clarity cognition nature of the mind, and then to realize the ultimate nature of the mind and abide within that realization of the emptiness of the mind, which is Mahamudra, that final state of realization. So in terms of the presentation of the most subtle level of this Buddha potential, Buddha nature, is that the mind of pure clarity and cognition lacks any self-existent quality, inherent existent nature. And at the same time, So that is called the natural potential, or naturally abiding potential. Then we also have developing potential. And that is our virtuous minds, such as our love, kindness, generosity, compassion, the altruistic mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta, and our wisdom and insight. By developing and continuously developing and improving, perfecting these qualities of the mind itself, the virtues, eventually they will give rise to the experience of the omniscient mind, called the wisdom truth body of the four bodies of perfect enlightenment. So we have this innate natural purity of the mind, this clear knowing primordial mind that is empty of any inherent existence because it is a dependent arising. And we have virtues or virtuous minds. So perfect your virtue. All of us have some love. All of us have some compassion and kindness. We all have some generosity, some tolerance and patience, and so on. So by perfecting these virtues, committing your life to perfecting virtue, will lead you to the realization of your innate potential for enlightenment, will lead you to the experience, the attainment of Buddhahood. So try to reflect on that for yourself. We have this naturally abiding potential and this developing potential. So in Geshe Lodin's Path to Enlightenment, describing this briefly, he gives examples that this mind of pure clarity and awareness, or clarity and cognition, is likened to a mirror that is pure and functions to reflect objects. Imagine that mirror caked with dirt and layers of dirt and mud. So those layers of dirt and mud don't actually become oneness with the mirror, but they obscure and obstruct the functioning of the mirror, its capacity to reflect. And our minds are similar to that. Like that, our minds at the most subtle level are perfectly pure and clear, but are obscured or obstructed temporarily by delusions and karmic seeds and tendencies, or karma. By purifying our minds, as in the case with the mirror, if we were to remove the dirt and clean the mirror, because the dirt, the mud, never become oneness with the mirror, what will be left in this cleaning process is the pure mirror itself, and this beautiful capacity to reflect shapes and colours accurately that are placed in front of the mirror. By purifying our minds and by eliminating step by step all of these obscuring and obstructing factors, such as our delusions and the karma, the seeds and tendencies from the actions that are motivated by these delusions, the pure, clear knowing mind will become more and more apparent. And especially by meditating on ultimate truth and realizing the ultimate nature of the virtuous minds and mind itself, we will experience more and more the purity of this ultimate truth, which is developed progressively and step by step. This pure nature of the mind itself does not have delusions. Delusions are an affliction or an obscuration of this pure nature of the mind. Which is interesting, isn't it? If you think about yourself, whatever your view of yourself, however you hold yourself in your mind, besides the basic self-grasping ignorance, I'm a very fat, I'm a really stupid, I'm a bit of a loser, it doesn't matter what I do, everything seems to turn to rubbish or shit. I fail, things always go bad. These are afflicted views, and there's actually no basis in truth. There may be valid basis in terms of your experience of your life, the experiencing of your unwholesome karmas, the negative seeds and tendencies in your mind, but they are not who you are. They're not even close. They are temporary experiences. And understandable negative views if your life is very painful and you have a lot of negativity and suffering. But all of this is taking place. Our pain and our suffering, our negative views, our low self-esteem, is all taking place within this pure, clear knowing mind that lacks any inherent self-existent nature or quality whatsoever. Try to transition towards the ultimate reality. You don't have to believe these transient, conventional realities. It's a good question you could ask yourself. Why do you believe these thoughts? Where did you learn these negative ideas, negative concepts? And why do you identify with them? Logically analyze them for yourself. One of the extraordinary benefits I've always found in the pathway practice in Mahamudra, the first stage of Mahamudra called Samatha Mahamudra, meditating on mind itself, is if you persevere and if you practice over a long period of time, you can discover the more subtle primordial mind of clarity and awareness, because it's ever present. It's amazing, even when you're having a bad day, still this pure, clear knowing mind is present. But our attention is totally caught up in the level of the karma that's ripening and the painful emotions that might be arising. But even in that moment, the pure mind is still present, but we're not aware of it. The more you experience this primordial mind, this pure, clear, knowing nature of the mind, the more you'll have an object of refuge for you to apply your attention and learn to release and let go. And these dark storm clouds of emotion and life experiences will pass because you know that they're impermanent. Rather than reifying the negativity, grasping at this negative identity, solidifying your pain in this negativity, you learn to release and let go. And try to place your attention more and more on the meditative experience you've gained of the pure, clear knowing mind itself. But this can only come from experience. And I'll talk briefly about this practice in a while. The first thing to try to recognize for yourself, and you need to study and think a lot about this as well, and you use your own reasoning and some logic and analysis, and do some analytical meditation to cultivate that faith that this is the nature of the mind. Unborn, unceasing, and ever present. And I was talking in the last presentation about refuge. Place your refuge in that fact. First, by having a conceptual idea of the mind, but most importantly by meditating on the mind. You will find this for yourself. And you'll have this beautiful, oh my goodness, experience. And you release, and you can release, and learn to abide more and more within this sphere of clarity and awareness. Another example Geshe-la gives in the Path to Enlightenment, and over the years I've read many times for myself, is And I've thought about quite a lot. I find a beautiful example. It's good to look at the different examples in the text because they may not all suit you. But by searching and reading and studying and thinking for yourself, you'll find some examples or even one example that suits who you are and how you think and what your life experience is. So another example Geshe-la gives on page 296 is how the mind, in this case, is like water. You know, the nature of water is clear and pure. However, if you mix a lot of mud and silt and dirt in water, so now the water itself appears muddy and dirty and really bad colour, which is maybe how we feel sometimes in our life and in our own minds. And we start to identify with that, sort of like being muddy and dirty, a person, and with bad qualities. But in fact, the water is always water, and we can purify. If you have a really good purification system, like reverse osmosis, it can remove even heavy metals and really subtle pollutants in the water. So you're left with really pure water. Because the water and the impurities don't mix so that the impurities become H2O. But they mix with, obscure that pure quality of water itself. Our minds are like that. We can purify with extraordinary opponent practices by perfecting and relying on perfecting our virtues, relying on love and kindness and compassion. For example, generosity and so on. And I think a couple of presentations ago I presented just briefly again the practice of Vajrasattva, a very specific purification meditation practice. Reciting mantra, generating our concentration and imagining various ways of purifying the mind, imagining and meditating on eliminating the dirt, the dust, the mud, the filth from within the mind. The negative tendencies, habits, karmic seeds from our anger and intolerance, from engaging in non-virtuous actions. Because they are impermanent. They do not exist inherently. You can't find a standalone, self-existent, self-empowered essence to even your most negative minds and actions. They are impermanent, and you can purify. So the process of the Buddhist path is very heavily one of purifying the mind. Because your potential for enlightenment, the innate purity of the mind is there. It's ever present. It's not inherently existent. It is a mere dependent phenomena, dependent arising, and therefore, actually, freedom is possible. So by engaging in the path to enlightenment, we're engaging in a pathway of purifying, like purifying water, until there is just the pure water left. And through engaging in these methods and the pathway practices, you eliminate and remove these negativities. You are not a bad person. You are not an evil or negative person. Such thoughts have no benefit. But thoughts and recognition of your own beautiful, pure mind have extraordinary benefit. So pay more attention to that as a counterbalance to the negativities that we may be living with. And so now I'm visualizing all of you people and your beautiful faces, and so I know you. I know some of you who I'm talking to. You don't have to identify with and believe these negativities. There are previous causes in your mind as to why they're arising for you, but they are transient, they are impermanent. Let them go and take refuge in your own Tathagata Garbha, Buddha nature. Discover the mind by way of your own meditative experience and start to trust in that experience and take refuge in that pure nature of your mind. Geshe-la gives another example, and these three examples are useful. Sometimes contemplate them, sometimes pay attention to them. You might purify your water before you drink it. have a look at your pure water. Compare it to the tap water and realise, oh, what's happened here? Same water, but this is contaminated. This has much less contamination. They taste differently. Oh my goodness, when Margaret and I were in Canada some years ago visiting our holy guru, Zazep Tulku Rinpoche, we tasted the most delicious water I've ever had in my life in the mountains. Canadian water, mountain water, and in some special villages. There's one town called Clearwater, and the water we drank was extraordinary, so pure, so clean, so fresh. And compared to the water I drink at home, there's no comparison. There's so much pollutant, so much contaminants in the water. So think about it just while you drink water. And if I could purify and eliminate completely, that water will be perfectly pure. Like that, my mind today is a little bit confused. I'm a little bit upset. I feel just down. I feel very unpleasant in myself. But that's not my nature. That is temporary, coming from my past. Actually, my mind is perfectly pure. The potential for an omniscient mind of a Buddha abides in my heart. Now, think like that. And if you're not sure about that, try to disprove it to yourself. So the next example given in the text, and another that I've personally connected with and have enjoyed in my life, is that the mind is like the sky. Perfectly pure space. And these afflictions and pain and suffering and delusions are like the clouds that come and go within this clear, pure sky or space. They never completely mix with or completely merge with space permanently. They just obstruct this purity of space. And like that, the delusions, the destructive emotions, the pain that we feel, the painful times we go through, all of this arising in our minds are like clouds, storm clouds. And if you train in the pathway practice of Samatha Mahamudra, or mindfulness of the mind, you will know very quickly, you will learn very quickly for yourself that they are impermanent. Even if you try, you can't keep one of these storm-like clouds ever present, static, permanent, even though it might feel like it sometimes. And I know sometimes we can experience like a depression or a negative state of mind that just seems to stay the same every day. But actually, if you pay attention, there are multiple moments, limitless moments of experience and different thoughts, different negative conversations going on in your mind that are dark and negative. It is still impermanent. Recognizing that can be quite liberating. And I must say, I don't know of any instant solution to pain. I don't know of an instant solution to the suffering we endure. But when you recognize the impermanent quality or nature of these negative emotions and states, and see the passing, and allow the natural abiding and passing of these negativities, at some point for yourself you'll start to realize their impermanent nature. And if they are impermanent, and if you don't feed and empower them, then they must weaken in time. And if we can sit through a process and apply of releasing and apply powerful methods to oppose and purify our minds, eventually the storm clouds within your mind will part and the clarity of the mind will become more and more apparent. So one of the purposes, one of the main goals of meditating on the mind in this Mahamudra pathway tradition is to gain experience of and deep recognition for yourself of this pure, clear knowing mind. that has never been completely mixed with or tainted by your faults, your suffering and pain, and your delusions. And then holding that as the object for your concentration practice, achieve powerful deep concentration and complete calm abiding, so that you can then direct your meditation to realizing your innate natural potential by realizing the emptiness nature of mind, which is not that the mind does not exist, some sort of nihilistic experience, but the realization that the mind is not something that is established by way of its own power. The mind is not something that exists because it has an inherent self-existent nature. The mind is a dependent phenomena. One of the best things you could do for yourself would be to study dependent origination, dependent arisings. That is the study of emptiness. Because if anything arises depending on other factors, such as causes and conditions, then that thing, that apparent object or phenomena, has no self-nature whatsoever. Before coming into being, there was nothing. When conditions, factors and causes or parts come together, there is now the appearance of this object. And we can now label this object in a certain way. Unfortunately, our minds superimpose with that labeling that there is something that has an essence or essential nature. There is some standalone, inherent existent quality to what I'm referring to. The fact that that does not exist is not nihilistic, because what does exist is the complex dependent arising. For example, our minds are a continuum. Past moments of mind are the causes for present moment of mind. And there is nothing in front of that, the future. The future, what we refer to as the future, arises as we experience new present moments coming from the past. It is a complex dependent arising. So I would like to encourage you, if you're interested, to read, if you have Geshe Loden's Path to Enlightenment, read through these few pages from page 294 to 297 and look at these examples, and keep in mind it's most important to not just have a superficial reading and not even listen to a teaching once or twice, but we need to internalize this for ourselves. It's your path. It's your journey to enlightenment. Even the Buddhas can't give you their enlightenment, nor can they take your suffering from you. You alone must do that. You have to do that. So it's not easy, this path to enlightenment, but it's not as hard as remaining in the cycle of samsara. If you really contemplate samsara and the 12 dependent links, that's frightening. That's difficult. Being a victim of delusions and negative minds and suffering and pain, that's difficult. So with effort, with faith, as I mentioned earlier, cultivate your faith with deep listening, thinking and meditation, so that you will overcome the lack of conviction you may have. That's up to you. And to overcome any laziness. Cultivate your own faith. Then apply yourself with meditation practice. So I would just like to recommend maybe reading more than once, maybe many times, this section in Geshe Loden's Path to Enlightenment, and any other beautiful source texts that you can find, particularly Geshe Loden's Fundamental Potential for Enlightenment. And if you are inclined, and I certainly would recommend, just my sort of opinion, my sort of view, study and practice the Pathway Mahamudra especially mindfulness of mind, and the meditation on ultimate nature of mind and the ultimate nature of oneself and all phenomena. This is how you liberate the mind of all obscurations and obstructions. Bear with me, I'll get it out. It's important that we study emptiness, ultimate truth, so that we can realize in our deep meditative practice the ultimate nature of the mind, which is the natural potential we have for enlightenment. This fact that the mind lacks any self-nature or inherent nature. At the moment, one of our main obscuring factors, the source, in fact, of all other obscurations, is our ignorance, which is a mental factor or a state of mind that grasps that phenomena and oneself are inherently existent, as though oneself and all other phenomena have some independent existence, some essential quality that stands alone, that is the object, that is I myself, a person, that is the mind. And our minds, as part of ignorance, our minds lack the awareness to the fact that there is no inherent existent self, phenomena, any phenomena. You can't find. Take it on as a task for yourself through your life. See if you can find anything that exists independent of causes and conditions, that exists independent of parts, and that exists independent of minds labelling it as this or that. See what you can find. Because this ignorance, on the one hand grasping that things are inherently existent, and unaware of the fact that that is not the case, that this is the source of all of the other disturbing emotions that we endure and experience in our lives. This is the root source of all of our pain and suffering, this ignorance. So the goal is to try to eliminate this. Your attachment, your craving and the grasping, your anger and intolerance, your jealousy and pride and arrogance, miserliness as well. They have as their root cause or root source within your own mind this ignorance. And these all make up the storm clouds that completely obstruct your innate purity, the purity of the mind. So this ignorance that's grasping and holding that all phenomena are inherently existent, when in fact nothing is inherently existent and nothing has self-existent nature or is substantially existent, means that one's mind, afflicted with this ignorance, is in contradiction to reality. Have a think about that. So this powerful inner view we have in our minds is completely in contradiction to truth and reality. Have you ever wondered why things don't work out so well? Have you wondered why things keep changing? Why we live with uncertainty? And so on. Why we have pain and suffering? How we view things is false, is wrong, incorrect. This is a major affliction. So then, our view that things exist inherently, which is in contradiction to reality and truth, can be overcome with wisdom, perceiving emptiness of inherent existence, and realizing the emptiness of inherent existence and the dependent nature of all phenomena will eliminate this false grasping, false perception from our minds. And we start living in harmony with truth and reality. And this is how we free our minds. How we free our minds from the obscuring factors and obstructions, these storm clouds, this dirt and dust or pollutants, obstructing the pure clear mirror or the purity of the water or the pure clear space itself. And we can realize this potential for enlightenment, combining this realization with the perfection of virtue. You can achieve the same experience of the Buddha and be completely free of the cycle of samsara and possess limitless qualities to bring benefit to others and serve the welfare of other living beings. Anyone who completely eradicates or eliminates the afflictions and obscurations from their minds and the karma for rebirth in samsara, eliminating the obscurations to liberation, becomes an arhat and is liberated. And anyone who can eliminate from their minds even the subtlest cognitive obscurations becomes a Buddha. Eliminating completely all obscurations to liberation and omniscience, one achieves Buddhahood. So to finish off, and I just wanted to speak briefly then about a practice, the practice that we can engage in so as to realize this innate natural potential that we possess. And the extraordinary pathway practice that I would like to recommend for those who are interested or inclined is to meditate on the mind itself and practice the mindfulness of mind. So in the first talk I made available in these recordings, I gave a guided meditation and spoke briefly about this meditation on mind. And what I will do is I'll do a recording of another guided meditation as an MP3 so that you can download that and if you want, and then you could use that to, hopefully I can give with this guided meditation a nice structure and guideline for progressing through meditation on mind. And I'd mentioned in that first recording just one line from the extraordinary holy verses from the great Indian master and yogi J. Maitripa, who was a guru to the great holy Tibetan master Lama Mapa Lotsawa. And I just mentioned the first line where he says that generally all phenomena are mind itself, which could become a lifetime study for you, just this line. And Geshe-la, in his commentary, his beautiful commentary found in his great treasury of Mahamudra, Geshe-la says the meaning of this is that all phenomena are dependent on mind. All that is known, so you think for yourself, everything I know is dependent on my own knowing consciousness. And there's many things I don't know, so what are they to me? Everything depends on mind. Everything that I experience is labelled by my mind. All depends on mind. There is nothing you can find or that we can refer to that is independent of or separate from my own mind. Think about that. Study the implications of that. Meditate on the implications of that for yourself. The great Indian master, Chandrakirti, said that the root cause of all beings and the variety of all phenomena is the mind itself. Contemplate that and research that for yourself. I don't actually have the time in this presentation to go into a lot more detail. But think about this and research it. He said that the mind itself is the fundamental cause of samsara and nirvana, Contemplate that for yourself. Samsara is not out there. It's not a thing. Objectifying it is not so useful. Samsara is your mind, your experience of your own afflictions and the karmic seeds implanted in your mental continuum, your mind, by impulsive action. And it's playing out over and over again. We make contact with a pleasant or unpleasant objects. That means our minds make contact through their senses or sense doors with pleasant and unpleasant objects, people and experiences. That's ripening of. Then the ripening of our karma arises. Maybe we feel hostile to unpleasantness or have a grasping and desirous attachment to something that's pleasant. And then we act and we implant a seed in our minds and a tendency by way of a potential or predisposition towards future experience. Where's this happening? It's the mind. To understand samsara, look into your own mind. And where is the potential for nirvana? It is the very innate or intrinsic nature of the mind itself. To be perfectly pure, clarity and cognition that is empty of any inherent existence. So think about this, for example, and contemplate this for yourself. Try to find any true existence of the mind. Try to find the mind itself. As we do in the practice of the mindfulness of mind. Find this pure clarity, cognitive phenomenon, the mind. And you won't find it at the level of these conceptual elaborations and all of this thinking that's arising in your mind, nor in your destructive emotions. But by concentrating your focus, part of the mind, observing the mind itself as it is for you moment by moment and here and now, you'll observe a continuous stream of the arising, abiding and passing of emotions and thoughts and internal chatter. And train to just observe and release. Acknowledge, accept and release whatever arises until the mind settles and will become more and more settled. And then importantly, as you're observing more acutely and a bit more subtly this coarse activity of the mind, as you observe a present thought, emotion, experience, memory or feeling passing, dissolving and disappearing, and before the future thought has arisen, pay attention to the absence or any absence of that coarse mental activity that becomes apparent. And this is like a window into the subtle nature of the mind, or subtle mind, more subtle mind. And then train to hold your concentration single-pointedly until step by step you discover this primordial, clear, cognitive mind. J. Maitrippa, in the next line of this verse, revealed to the great master Mapa in a dream. He said, your guru arises from this mind. So even that person who is your guru or your teacher, it's not up to them. It doesn't come from them. They are not inherently existent, independently existent from your own mind. Whichever person, whichever man or woman is your guru or teacher, actually is determined by your own thought, comes from your own mind. And you make that choice and your decision for yourself. There are no phenomena that exist in and of themselves by way of their own power, outside of being established by your own mind. There's something to contemplate. And importantly, in relation to your own guru or your teacher, it's your karma. It's your mind and your decision, your thought, that determines. Then Maitrippa says, there is nothing other than mind. The nature of any appearance is established by the mind. As you practice mindfulness of the mind and pay attention to the mind as you engage the world and your life, you pay attention to the involvement of the mind in everything that's going on. You may come to a point where you stop objectifying everything and blaming other people, blaming the world, blaming this pandemic, blaming whoever. You might start to recognize what's arising in your mind is coming from within your own mind, is determined by yourself, your mind. All appearances are dependent on the mind that establishes them the way that they are experienced. Try to recognize that. This is post-meditation practice, like in between your formal sitting practices. Pay attention to what happens when you're in the world, in your family environment, and so on. What's bubbling up in your mind? What are you perceiving? How are you feeling? What are you experiencing at the moment? All is established by your mind. All is determined by the mind. Maitrippa says, whatever appears is all the nature of mind. And then he says, even that is primordially unestablished, referring to the mind itself. The mind itself is not established from its own side by way of its own power as mind, mental consciousness. He says the mind is primordially unestablished. Mind is that which we label mind. Mind itself labels mind. And if we observe and relying on the teachings of Lord Buddha, the playing out of these activities within our mind, we can start to recognize how positive minds give rise to positive outcomes, and negative minds and destructive negative emotions give rise to negative experience and outcomes. So pay attention to the mind, and most importantly, if you have time and if you're interested, try to meditate on the mind itself until you, over time and with diligence and your own effort and application, gain more and more, or at least a taste, some experience of this clear, knowing quality of mind. Mind that's intangible, formless, yet clear and cognitive, clear and knowing or experiencing. And abide with that, and train in single-pointed concentration on that. There are so many benefits at every level of our life experience that you can gain from this practice. And most importantly, to recognize aspects of your own innate potential. This very mind that we have, this primordial mind of clarity and awareness, is the stuff, if you like, that transforms into the all-knowing mind of a Buddha. You already have it. So don't put yourself down. Don't accept and reify any low self-esteem or negative image or concept of yourself. Through meditative practice and experience, see if you can gain the recognition of this purity. This beautiful, innate, pure, knowing mind. So I think that might be enough for now. So I'll just read, to conclude, I'll just read some lines of the verses of J. Maitrippa that indicate the pathway, the mode of practice. After the line where he says that the mind is primordially unestablished, meaning the mind is not established by way of its own self-existent power. Mind is empty of inherent existence. This unborn nature is not softened to this innate natural state by way of conceptuality or concepts. Just settle naturally and be without restriction. So in your meditative practice, just relax. Allow your mind to be as it is. Don't contrive any type of mind. Don't try to contrive any thoughts, memories, or imaginings. Meditate on your mind as it is here and now and moment by moment. And accomplish a settled state of mind. And discover this primordial, clear, cognitive mind. And abide with that. And in doing that, by maintaining a single-pointed concentration, let it do its job. There is so much power that will arise from this practice, by its very nature. Of course, people who know me, I could go on and on, but I won't. Maybe we'll leave it at that for now. And as I said, I will do a guided meditation as an MP3, which you can download and use. But don't always meditate listening to a guided meditation. Learn to meditate for yourself and gain experience. And if you're inclined, do your research and study for yourself. Starting, say, with Geshe Lodin's Path to Enlightenment, his fundamental potential. Then if you have the great treasury of Mahamudra, we need, to gain experience, we need to become very, very familiar with these teachings. And we need to think a lot, and we need to meditate a lot. And fruits will come. Fruits come from practice and familiarity. So I hope this is helpful. And since we're motivated with thoughts of others and the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta, to begin with, in order to ensure that our listening, thinking, contemplating is a cause for achieving the outcome of our intention, our attainment of enlightenment for the benefit of all living beings. So with a mind of goodwill and a good heart, dedicate any accumulated merit and virtue to the enlightenment, the happiness, the peace of all living beings without exception. By this virtue may all beings complete the collections of wisdom and merit, and attain the two holy bodies arisen from wisdom and merit. May the precious superior mind of enlightenment be generated in those who have not yet generated it, and not decrease in those who have developed it, but increase continuously.